Greetings, everyone. Thank you. So, I only get 30 minutes with you, so I got to talk fast because I have a plan. My plan is when you leave here, you're going to know more about flying in space than anybody you know. That's my objective. So I got to cram all that in your heads in 30 minutes. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the missions I was on. I've got a video that I'm going to show in just a couple of minutes. It's silent. I'm going to tell you what's going on in it. It's stuff from my 3 flights and then other cool stuff from other missions that I just wanted to put in to help tell the story. We'll talk about all the things you want to know, like going to the bathroom in space, all those really important science things that you're dying to know. We'll talk about all those. If I forget something that you're really dying to know, I'll leave a little time at the end so you can ask questions. And, well, I'm not going to challenge you to ask me a question I've never been asked before, but every now and then that does happen. But I love to talk about flying in space because, do you think it's fun? Yeah, it's fun. I'll answer one question before I start the video. People often ask, well, is it scary? Look, here's the thing. If you're not scared on the launch pad, you need to come back to Houston and get more training. Because you really don't know what's going on if you're not scared. I mean, it's not like, it's not that kind of scary. But everything has to work right. We're operating on the very, very edge of the technology that we have available to us. And everything has to work right. And by the way, it's also one of the most awesome things about being in the space program in general is everybody is on the same page. Everybody's trying to make the mission successful. And it's really fun to be part of a team, a group that is that together and wants the same things. I mean, we might have very different political views on a whole bunch of things, but when it comes to the missions, we're all on the same page. And that both makes it really fun to do. And that's also what is required to make it work. And there are thousands of people that make every mission work. And you can see all the signs of all those people as you go around Space Center Houston. You can see all the different technology that works together. And that's just a giant team of people. And in many ways, when I look back on my career as an astronaut, it's really about looking back on a career of working with the best people in the world. So with that, let's start the video if you don't mind, and I'll tell you what's going on. And if you have a question, just remember it, and we'll try to do it at the end, because it goes too fast. When I was a little kid, we were just starting to put humans into space, and we were converting missiles, basically, and putting a capsule on top and saying we're going to call that a rocket to put people in. So this was the first American went into space on a Mercury capsule on a Redstone rocket. 10 years later, only 10 years, we went to the moon on a rocket 100 times more powerful, 100 times. And that's the kind of rocket it takes to go to the moon. And of course on the moon, you only weigh 1/6 of what you do on Earth. So even in a spacesuit that weighs 300 pounds, you can do some pretty fancy footwork. And being Americans, after a couple trips to the moon, we had to bring a car with us. Because, that's what we do. Does that not look like fun? I didn't get to go to the moon. By the time I came along, we were flying the space shuttle. As Francie said, I was a baby engineer working in the Mission Control Center for STS-1, and then applied to be an astronaut. Didn't get selected, by the way, initially, and that's very common. Most astronauts are not selected the first time they try it, so of course there's a lesson in there for young people and for kids, and that is you don't just quit because somebody doesn't choose you the first time. You go do some homework and you say, well, what do I need to get better at? What experiences do I need to add? All those things to make me a better candidate for the next selection. Or alternately, go make $1 jillion and buy a seat. That's what you do nowadays. That wasn't a choice in my day. So this is a space shuttle going to space. On either side are these solid rocket motors, and in the middle are 3 tanks you don't see much coming out of, and that's because the solids put out a very visible plume. The liquid engines don't put out much. It's really steam coming out of the back of the space shuttle orbiter engines. The solid rocket motors are a bit of a rough ride. The reason we use them is because they're incredibly powerful, way more powerful than the liquids. The reason we don't really love the solid rocket motors is once you light them, there's no off switch. So once you start those engines, you're going somewhere. Hopefully you're going to space, but you're definitely going somewhere. As soon as we get to orbit, we go to work. And my job on the first flight was to operate this big robot arm. Anywhere else, we'd have called me a crane operator, but you can't have astronauts be crane operators. So instead, I was a remote manipulator system operator. And my job was to release that spacecraft, and it looks like it's flying away from us, but in fact, we're flying away from it. And in that big white barrel thing is an infrared telescope, which is cooled by liquid helium. Looking back at us, there's the cockpit, that's where the crew sits, there's that robot arm, and we did science with it for about a day and a half, and then went back to get it again. So Mike Coates is flying the orbiter. He flies us up next to the satellite. You can kind of see the side of my head. I'm operating the robot arm and going to reach out and grab it. And it looks like a hollow can when you look at this from the end. It really is. You put it over the end of that fixture and then pull a trigger inside. That causes some cables to wrap around that little post and get tight, and then we can hold on to it. And once you hold on to it, now you can move it around in the payload bay, put it back in, put down the latches, etc. So my second flight, we're doing another rendezvous mission, but this time with a satellite that's in orbit and stuck in orbit, and we plan to do some spacewalks. So here's Pierre and I getting our spacesuits on, and underneath the suit we wear this liquid cooling garment to keep from getting too hot, and underneath that we wear a diaper. Now you're thinking, yeah, but you wouldn't actually use it, right? Well, let me put it this way. My third spacewalk, I was in the suit for 13 hours. So what do you think? But I tell the kids at school, not the big job. You save that for when you come back in. Your mom is not there in the mission to change your diaper for you, so it's all on you, so to speak. So that's the satellite we're going after. And it's stuck in the wrong orbit, and we've brought along a motor to attach to it that will boost it to the orbit it's supposed to be in. But we've got to get a hold of it first, and this satellite was not meant to be grappled with that robot arm. It has no fixture on it. And it weighs 9,000 pounds. Of course, it's weightless in space, but it's not massless. So if you get squished between it and the space shuttle, you're definitely going to get hurt badly. So this commander flies us up very closely, and then Pierre is going to try and attach this device on the bottom side of this thing. And by the way, we took 2 of these devices with us. We brought one back. If you wander around Space Center Houston, you'll find the other one, the one we took with us but didn't use. Well, as you can see here, Pierre could not get it to latch onto the spacecraft. In our simulators on the ground, this was frankly easy. Got it right the first time every time. But in space, couldn't do it at all. Every time he went to touch it, it would just kind of turn away way more easily than our simulators did. And after the fact, we realized there was some friction in our simulators that we really hadn't accounted for correctly. So after 2 days of trying this, we gave up and said, well, we need to go to plan B. Plan B was, well, can we use 3 people and just grab it somehow? And we sent an idea to the ground. They modified our idea, went to the water tank. This is somebody pretending to be me here. There's somebody pretending to be Pierre. And there's our third, Tom Akers, that joined us for the spacewalk. And they said, this is how we think you should do it. And we said, okay, we'll do it that way. So the next day, here we are. There's me. There's Pierre. There's Tom. There's the spacecraft. It's slowly rotating in order to keep it stable. And when it gets to just the right spot, we're going to catch it with our hands. And Pierre is on the end of the arm, so he's our movable person. Tom and I are stuck. We're at our foot restraints. We can't move. But Pierre can move up and down, and so you can see he's giving hand signals saying, raise me up, raise me up. And when we got to just the right spot, there's only 3 places we could grab it. All the rest of this stuff is pretty flimsy. We had to grab these spots where there's a solid rod. We grabbed it, and now we got it. But now what do we do with it? Because we still have to get that capture bar on. But we did. We held on to it, snapped it on. Now I'm actually bolting it down to the motor. And I'm working with the same kind of tools I do when I work on my car. It's a ratchet wrench, 1/2-inch drive, 7/16 socket or something like that. We do standard, not metric. And the difference is, of course, when you lay your tools down in your drive when you're working on your car, they stay there. In space, they would, drift off, so they're all tethered to us instead. Anyway, we were able to get the satellite attached to the motor. This at the time was, for 10 years, was the longest ever spacewalk, and as Francie said, the only 3-person spacewalk. Being the longest ever spacewalk, probably the wettest ever diapers is what I figured. Now, of course, we have the space station up there, but when I was flying, no space station. And by the way, I'm too tall to be a space station astronaut, just a little aside. I don't fit in the Soyuz. We had to bring our lab with us and then bring it home because we didn't have a station. So we're going to follow Bob Cavanagh's stocking feet through the tunnel into the laboratory. And of course, he's not wearing shoes because no one wants to get kicked in the head with your, flying boots. But then you don't really need shoes in space. You really don't want to get kicked in the head with socks either, but at least it wouldn't be permanent damage. So this is the only staged scene in this whole thing, and it's staged in the sense that I'm standing on the ceiling, Chiaki is over here standing on the floor, Leroy's in here somewhere standing sideways. We really did that just to say, hey, you can stand in any direction you want. But the truth is, you always do work in the same direction that you did your training, mainly because the switch labels, have an up and down to them, right? They're printed in a certain way. So if you're going to do work, you kind of need to line up with the switch labels so you don't get confused about, well, wait, which switch goes with which label and which direction does what? Now, what are we doing? A lot of the science is basic physics, trying to understand things that you can't understand as well in the presence of gravity. But a lot of it is also life science stuff. We're trying to understand what happens to bodies in space because we know, we've been to the moon and back. The moon is very close. It's about a 3-day trip one way. Really close, actually. Mars, however, where we want to go because, hey, who knows if there was ever life on Mars? Well, Mars is a long ways, about a year to get there, about a year to get back. That's a long time in zero gravity. Well, we want to know what happens, and is it bad? Or can we fix it? Can we take some medicine instead, or what? So we also fly a bunch of little critters. These are salamanders, and these are salamander eggs, all at different stages of development, so that scientists can look and see. And the reason we fly critters, 2 reasons really. One, their lifespans are usually pretty short, so the effect of being in zero gravity shows up a lot sooner. And secondly, well, astronauts don't really like to be dissected when they come home from space. So, and the salamanders don't have a vote. So, that's one of the reasons we do it too. Now, I included this little quail chick. The Russians flew this little quail. It's just so darn cute, I had to put it in my video. Now, a lot of people think, well, sleeping in space must be awesome. You're just floating, right? But the problem is, you're just floating. And there's no difference between being awake and going to bed. You don't sleep on your bed, you sleep next to your bed. We strap ourselves down to try and make it feel like bed. It's not very convincing. Now, the station astronauts tell me that after a week or 2, you're sleeping great, but my missions were first 2 were each about a week, and the next one was 2 weeks. I never slept very well at all, I gotta tell you. In many ways, it's like going camping, where you wake up at 2 in the morning on the hard ground, and you're like, oh, I hope it's time to get up, and then, oh no, it's still, I need to sleep some more. Kind of a lot of things are like camping. Here I'm brushing my teeth like anywhere else, except there's no place to spit out my toothpaste, so you either swallow it or put it in your napkin from the morning or washcloth. Here I'm washing my hair with this pH balanced soap that's like camping soap. Great stuff, really. You lather up and then just dry it off with a towel. You don't have to rinse it. While I'm drying my hair, we're going to switch to a different camera view, and you're suddenly going to see me move across the cabin. Whoa, what happened? Well, what happened was they did a maneuver on the flight deck with the engine, so the space shuttle was moving out from under us and pinned us against the wall. Yeah, I didn't fly with Marcia, but I thought you ought to see what long hair looks like in space. This is more practical hair for space flight. And then, of course, there are people with really practical hair for space flight.
Hey.
Gordo's not clear on why they packed a brush for him. So we could have left that home and saved a little weight to orbit. Here I'm shaving like I do at home, except at home I can just open up my razor and dump the whiskers in the trash. In space they would float everywhere and you'd be breathing them and whatnot. So again, the wet washcloth comes into play to capture the whiskers. And the food's okay. A lot of the vegetables are dehydrated, so we have this machine that we squirt water into them, and then you kind of mush it around with your thumbs to get the water. Those are potatoes au gratin there and some kind of green vegetable. Not awesome, but if you let them hydrate and stick them in the oven, they're edible. You wouldn't go choose them, but they are edible. And if you can't live without peanut butter and jelly, we do fly that, but we don't fly bread, we fly tortillas, because the bread gets all dry and crumbly, and so if you gotta have your PBJ, you're gonna have it on a tortilla. And salt and pepper, you can't shake it on your food because it doesn't fall. So we have liquid salt and pepper instead, and you squirt it on your food. And there's Sam doing what you tell your kids not to do, playing with his food. Delicious. Shrimp cocktail, in case you were wondering what that was. And that's a hydrated hamburger on a tortilla. Of course, gotta have a tortilla. Now, pretty much anything you fly in space is a toy, including the food. Now, I told you about wearing diapers for spacewalks. Of course, we have a toilet that's more or less like one in a recreational vehicle. You got these things for privacy. Inside is where you put your backside. There's handles on each side because otherwise you would float off in the middle of the job. And it's really important to make sure you don't open the little door under here until you're on the toilet and then close it before you get off the toilet so things don't follow you around the cabin. Oh. And as I said, everything's a toy, including your crewmates. So this is Leroy doing the ice skater. You know, he goes fast and slow, fast, slow. Conservation of angular momentum for the physics students in the room. And this is Scott Kelly playing with a bubble of water. You know how water is, you can fill a cup a little over the top because of surface tension. Well, you can do it in space, you just make a bubble. And then you can put a little food coloring in and change the color. And then he's going to do a little more, this is what we call astronaut science, which means not really science. He's going to stick some Alka-Seltzer tablets in. Oh. And as they decompose, they give off gas and they're energetic enough to actually burst through the surface tension. So you see little bits of it shoot off from the sides, and right over here you're going to see a pretty big piece come right. There was that one, and here's another one. Yeah, astronaut science. And we did this on my flight. That's a little cherry drink and a little lemonade mixed together. And Bruce is showing you how to clean up a fluid spill as long as you know what it was and where it came from. Now, a lot of the astronauts have a military background. I don't, I was a civilian, but of course they got to practice their marching, right? So, well, anybody can march in place, but what about the 90-degree turn? It's harder than it looks. And the space station astronauts exercise for about 2 hours a day, every single day, because they don't want to come back to Earth after 6 months or a year and be a jellyfish. So they have 2-hour exercise period. This is Peggy, Super Peggy, as I call her, because she was a super astronaut and also super strong. But she's showing you how to use the exercise equipment, all the different aspects of it. And truthfully, some of the astronauts came back stronger than they launched because, on Earth, nobody has 2 hours available every day to exercise. Here I'm riding the exercise bike. You have to have a seat belt, or you can jump rope. Some people are better than others. Late in the mission, we took one of our dirty towels and balled it up and then wrapped it with gray tape because you can't go to space without gray tape. Or do anything without gray tape, really. So, we're trying soccer, and you can see we're not very good at it. And we also tried basketball. Jackie is dribbling, and then she's going to pass off to me, and every shot has to be a dunk shot because, of course, the ball doesn't come back down once it goes up. We have clearly not found the right sport, or we're not very athletic, one or the other. At the end of this is my second mission, we had some film. I let this camera run while I was putting on my pressure suit. And that's not staged, that's me trying to get in this darn thing. And it's a baby boy. They're very hard to get into. That neck dam is really tight so that if you ended up in the water wouldn't get down into your suit. And if you saw the movie Gravity and remember Sandra Bullock at the end, she just kind of gets in the lake and swims out of her suit. You can see I would have just drowned at the bottom of the lake. That would not be me getting out. Now I'm sitting right there on the right holding that camcorder. Behind us is this light show going on. And what's happening is, as we come through the atmosphere, we're hitting air molecules so hard, we're breaking them apart, literally, coming back together behind us, giving off the energy in the form of light. Because when we go to space, we launch, by the way, from near the equator, and we launch to the east because the Earth is spinning at about 1,000 miles an hour at the equator. So we only have to add 16,500 more miles per hour to get to orbital velocity, because you need 17,500 to orbit the Earth. Well, we put all that in with rockets going up, but to come home, we only slow down by about 500 miles an hour with the rocket engines. All the rest has to come out of something else, and it comes out of friction with the atmosphere. So space vehicles are all designed to handle a very high heat load, whether it's a capsule or a glider like the shuttle or whatever. And the bottom side of it is always made out of pretty exotic materials, some of which, by the way, just a little aside, are now in everybody's ovens, refrigerators, or anything else that needs to be insulated. The materials they use are really a spin-off from NASA research trying to find ways to protect vehicles from this extreme heat. Well, coming in with the space shuttle, we don't put the gear out till the very last minute or two because we're going to need them to land, but they also make it even draggier. It's not a very good glider in the first place. And we touched down at about 200 miles an hour, which is a lot faster than an airliner. And on my second flight was the first flight of the drag chute you see coming out here. And we actually fly the drag chute for the pilots in the room, not so much to help us stop on the runway, but to give us more braking authority so that we can use the brakes to handle a higher crosswind for landing in KC, because there's only one runway there. So if there's a crosswind, you're still going to have to land with it. And the drag chute helps handle that. Now, after however long you've been in space, for our missions that were fairly short, we would get up and walk out of the vehicle, but not very well. And you'll see that we look pretty shaky if you watch us, and there's a little bit of talking to your feet to say what you want to do next, because your feet don't really quite remember what this walking thing is about. And I'm here, I went to wave up there and just about fell, and so I grabbed back onto the handrail. Now I'm going to point at these feet. I'll try and keep my cursor on them because you can see that you have to talk to them. They're not doing anything. There we go. It's kind of like you look at them like, I'm walking now, let's walk. And if you get one started, then your body's like, oh yeah, I remember this walking thing, I can do that. And on my first mission, when I came back, I was in a hurry. We had, my wife was in California at Edwards where we planned to land, but we landed in Florida instead. So I was hurrying to get there, my shower done so we get back to Houston to meet our families. And I went down the hall and I turned to go to where the showers were, except I turned, but I didn't go that way. I kept going this way. And of course, I first looked to see if anybody saw me, and then I went very carefully back and turned the corner, and my body had kind of forgotten the part about going around corners where you lean a little bit. Like you do on a bicycle or anything. You don't think to yourself, oh, okay, I'm going pretty fast, I should lean a lot. You just do it. But my body didn't do it. And so, no lean, no turn. Keep going straight. Only once. And then, you're like, oh yeah, my body remembers what this is all about. And some of those things are pretty fun. So, let's see, I've got a few more minutes of questions, so I'm going to stop yakking at you and see what you want to know that I didn't tell you. So, who's got a question? I know it's a very shy group. Yes? So, you asked about the application process to get in this program. Well, they list a bunch of requirements that you have to have. Typically, it's a master's degree. They might have changed that. I think they might have changed that recently to be something beyond that. The pilots have a certain set of requirements, and the non-pilots a different set of requirements. But basically, what they're looking for is people with a technical degree, whether it be engineering or science or medical, whatever, and ideally, people with operational experience. In other words, experience doing things where what you actually do decides the outcome, not so much what you think. So, mountain climbing experience, flying airplanes, jumping out of airplanes, scuba diving, lots of different military places where you can get operational experience. Those are the kinds of things because, the fact is some people are good at those things and some people are not good at those things. You kind of can't tell until somebody gets into it and starts doing it. The problem for anybody wanting to be an astronaut is there's an awful lot of qualified people out there. So there's a little bit of luck involved, no question. And timing and being at the right age when you have the right skill set. And frankly, if it were me, I would still say to somebody, come here to Houston, work at Johnson Space Center, be productive, get to know the people, because, if you have two people that have equal skill sets as far as you can tell, and you know this person and you like them, you think they'd be a great crewmate, and you're not sure about this person because they live in, somewhere else, you're probably going to choose the people that you think would be better because you know them. It's not discriminatory, it's just what anyone would do because you're not comfortable taking a risk on somebody you don't know anything about. Yeah.
So you're in microgravity, right? So your spine is decompressed. Did you get any taller?
I did. In fact, on my third flight, the only thing I said from space that anybody ever remembered was that I called down and I said, hey, I just realized I'm too tall to be an astronaut now. Because I grew about 1.5 inches, and I'm only about 3/4 of an inch under the height requirement, so I was over it. But yeah, I did. Of course, you lose it all right away. There's two things that cause you to get taller. One is you lose this curve in your back, because gravity is, smashing you into the ground, creating that curve, and without it, your back straightens out. And the other part is all the little discs in your back that have been unsquished a little bit. So for me, at my height, 1.5 inches. Yes. Did we fight in space? Not anything that I know of. I remember the scene in Apollo 13 where I think it was Apollo 13, where it kind of looks like they have a contentious moment there. I suspect that was artist creativity. I've never seen it. Again, I didn't fly for a year. So maybe flying for a year in space, you might want to spend some time in your room on one end of the station and, away from, I would need that. I would need to get away from everybody every now and then just for my sanity. Probably means I wouldn't be a good station astronaut. Yes?
What other planets have you visited?
What other what?
Planets have you visited?
Oh, what other planets have I been to? In fact, humans only have ever been to one planet, and you're on it. The only other place humans have been is to our moon. 12 humans walked on the moon, and another 12 or so went around it. And so that's it. We really want to go to Mars. Mars would be incredibly interesting. Can't wait for that day to come. Yes?
How come you were just a civilian and you got in, but other people were like military personnel?
You asked about the difference between military and civilian astronauts. I'll put it this way. The only way you can get the piloting experience that you need to be selected as an astronaut pilot is from a military background. It's the only place where you can get the kind of flying experience you have to have. So once you got that part squared away as mission specialists, non-pilots, it doesn't really matter where you come from. And so you could be a civilian or not, because NASA is a civilian agency. It's not a military agency. And even the military folks, while they're working for NASA, are what they call detailed. They're not in the military. I mean, they still are, but they are detailed to NASA, and they're subject to all of the NASA management practices, not the military management practices. Actually, they kind of do both. Yeah, way back. Yep, Pat. Say that one more time. Oh, what is the feeling of flying? Floating is awesome. It's just as good as you think it would be. You push off with one finger, and you just drift. It probably end up spinning and turning and whatnot. It's as fun as you think it would be. It was awesome the very first moment I got there, and it was awesome the whole time I was up. Yeah, some people get sick. I felt pretty bad the first day of my first mission, and then I kind of got used to it, and then I was okay. But it doesn't matter. It's just as good as you'd like. Yes? Really loud. Say it one more time.
Was it the same when you landed with the rocket than to land with the airplane?
Yeah, in fact, well, let's see, you asked about landing. So all of the landings so far have been basically glider landings, either with the capsule or with the airplane. The airplane lands more smoothly, the space shuttle lands more smoothly because you got the gliders. The rocket landings either splash into water or put on the thrusters at the last second. You have different ways to do it. I didn't get the chance to fly in one of the capsule landings. I've talked to a lot of people that have, and some of them are pretty exciting, and some of them have come sort of an off-nominal trajectory and experienced very high G loads, like 9 Gs. That's a little more exciting than I was looking for, actually.
All right, this will be the last question.
That's you with glasses.
Me? How old were you when you started flying?
How old was I when I started to be an astronaut? So when I got selected to be an astronaut, I was 29, almost 30. But when people ask me, well, how old were you when you started training or whatever? Truth is, the day you're born, you start training. Because everything you do in your life is preparing you for things you're going to do later in life. So when you're a kid, you're training for something, You may not know what, you probably don't know what, but you're training because everything matters. So I really try and help kids in school understand you got to learn every day in school. You've got to learn to get along with your friends, to respect and get along with your teachers, to learn in every class that you're in, because all of that stuff will matter to what you're going to be when you grow up. You don't get to be 20 and then say, oh, I think I'm going to be this now. It all depends on what you're doing your whole life. Now, nobody's perfect. Nobody does everything perfect all along the way. We all screw up along the way. Successful people are the ones who recognize more quickly that they're on a path they don't want to be on and get back on the path they want to be on. And they learn to self-correct. That's what makes successful people different. They're faster at correcting their trajectory. I got to go because I know there's other people coming in the room. Thanks. You've been a great audience.